Man, I love this machine. I could sit on that thing all day, although I have other things to do probably here. So I got this area behind the building prepped and ready for seed. It will be, I don't know, I'm still trying to make a decision, but I think I'm gonna go with tall fescue out here just because it's mostly going to be left to whatever rainfall we get. Also, this is an area where I do plan to drive around, but I'm going to build more of these pathways with wood chips like I have all down by the plots and like I have right here that I did during the winter because it was so muddy out here. And those work really, really well, but I am gonna plant grass on there and then I'll just start building the roadways as soon as I figure out where most of the traffic is going to go. Up here by the building, as you can see, obviously this building is about 34 feet tall to the top peak. This is going to be mostly shade nearly the entire time, and so I'm probably just going to do my shade mix over here. It's not going to look exactly the same obviously as that fescue out there, but if I have this path right down the middle, that will be a separator of the two anyway. The other thing I could try would be tall fescue over here to start with, since it is more shade tolerant, but I really think this is going to be a dense shade area. I know there's also some options for growing grass and being able to drive on it. There's some systems that you can put in place, but they're very, very expensive, and this area, I don't know if you can tell exactly how big it is, but it's not small, so I don't think that those systems are going to be something that I'm going to worry about right now. Over here on the west side of the building, I think I described this in a couple videos back, but I'm going to do a small landscape border up against the building so I don't have grass right there and have to trim against the metal. And then back on this side, I think I'm going to go with a tall fescue rye mix, which is not typical, not something that a whole lot of people do because those two textures are a little strange, but I would like to get this going sooner rather than later and get that rye to pop up and hold the soil in place. And not that fescue is really slow, but it is a little slower typically, and so I would like to get that going over here, maybe get a slightly softer texture out of just a little rye in there. But I really think it's mostly going to bake up on this west side because this is the hottest part of the building. In the future, I do have an irrigation line going right down here to where Kelsey's garden is going to be, so I could tap off of that. I just didn't do it right now because I also wanted to figure out exactly where that landscape bed is going before I put the irrigation in, so I'll probably end up putting heads along here eventually. And if I wanted to switch to ryegrass around the building at that point, I could just start over and do a renovation. We know I've done plenty of those. Up here in the front yard just continues to be so windy, so I'm delaying my seeding for a couple of days here until I can hopefully find one day that's not this windy so I can get the seed down accurately, start watering, get a good accurate water on everything, and then I think probably it's looking like, even with my sprinklers, I'm gonna have to do some hand watering here. With how windy it's going to be blowing around during the middle of the day. So we'll figure this out, but I want to delay. It's also supposed to be in the 80s for a few days this next week. I would like that warmth on the seed, but also because of how windy it's supposed to be and how easy it's going to be to dry out, I think I'm going to delay until after that where it looks a little cooler and a little more manageable. Finally found my rain gauge and all of our stuff that is yet to be completely unpacked, so felt good to get that thing back out here. I checked that after every rain, at least I did at our other property. Or the nice thing about this one is that it is a long-term rain gauge. It holds, I think, up to 11 inches of rain. I also like that this middle part here is in hundredths instead of tenths, just to be slightly more accurate. And then that spills over into this big part here, and you just pour it into the middle part again to measure. I can tell it's seen better days. It's been out in a lot of weather. We'll see how long it lasts before I need to get a new one, but really like that thing. Well, it's a beautiful day today, getting closer and closer to the first mow, but I also actually had to put sunscreen on today, which is not all that crazy considering how long it's been since these arms have seen any sunlight like this, but it's actually quite warm out in the sun today, which means we're getting closer to it being consistently nice, at least let's hope. So before I get things rolling, I gotta clean this deck out, and also I'd like to sharpen these blades. I think I have an extra one of these too, which I can sharpen a couple blades here and make sure we're ready to go for the season. Okay, so this right here is a flap disc that I put onto my grinder, and this is the way that I've been sharpening blades for at least a few seasons now. It works really well, very easy, and it's not nearly as aggressive as something like a metal grinding disc would be. On a lot of these mower blades, they just need to touch up. They don't need a whole lot of metal taken off of them. So I find that this thing, which it's starting to get worn out, this one is, but it's really like having a piece of sandpaper on a disc that you can just easily move along here. So what you want to do is just follow the angle of that blade, keep it exactly as it is from the factory. That's really all there is to it. So the unique thing that I have going on right now that you're probably not going to see in your own yard is that I have all these grass types right next to each other, which tells you a lot about how they green up and also about how they start growing compared to other things. So you can see here, this is ryegrass on the end, and then right here in the middle is tall fescue. And this one is just starting to green up, but there's still a lot of the brown and dormant stuff in there, and that's usually always the slowest one. Down here is Kentucky bluegrass. But the ryegrass really could be mowed, and especially the tall fescue really doesn't need to be yet. So I might just have to make sure that this mower is still functioning correctly and just, mow the ryegrass just to make sure that it's working. Alright, cool. Still works. That's a good thing to know. A lot of green up yet needs to happen. We're just getting into a few of the nicer days. Once that gets more consistent, then I should see a lot better green up happening. But let's take a look at another interesting thing I saw when I was roaming around out here checking out the plots. Quick look here at one of these low cut plots. This is Kentucky bluegrass. This was planted last fall, so it takes bluegrass quite a while to get going, and this is pretty good coverage right now for just being planted last fall, but it's going to get a lot better as we get into the warmer weather and I start taking care of this. But one of the things I wanted to show you, I noticed this last year on a lot of the plots. This is some weird type of grass that is just in the soil around here. I don't know exactly what it's called. It kind of turns a purple color on the leaves during the winter time, and then it's wispy, it has some little hairs on it, and there's really not a lot I can do about it once it gets into a plot like this. I have to come in here if I find a good bunch of it, and I usually just cut those out by hand with a knife. So it's looking like I'm going to have to do that the next few days, come in here and try to isolate these plants and get them out of here before it starts to go. But I'm not sure once I start mowing this and continue to mow at 3/4 of an inch this season, if this stuff would survive that or not. But I'm really not going to probably try to find out. I'd like to get rid of it and just start hand weeding these plots right now, sooner rather than later, to get a good start on it. So I've been noticing a lot of questions too about spots like this. This is a Kentucky bluegrass, the big plot of Kentucky bluegrass. you'll see this nice, beautiful green area. And this happens a lot in spring, and people wonder, why is this brown stuff still brown and why is this so green? Well, usually this is gonna happen with your dogs, where you'll notice where they go to the bathroom, that's gonna be fertilized more than the rest of this stuff, and you're gonna see a spot like this. Now, I don't really have dogs out in this section. There are a few random country dogs that I have seen out here roaming around, but this is probably from deer or another animal that has been in this plot. You'll see there's a few more of them here that are really, really green. So a lot of people might also ask, well, why don't you just fertilize the rest of this so that it all looks like this? Well, you could try to target some of the rest of this grass, but we're not to the full spring green up yet. So what's gonna happen is once all this stuff gets green and starts to grow really vigorously in the spring, usually spots like this are gonna grow really aggressively, and they're hard to maintain, and they actually sometimes will lose a lot of this color because the plant is just growing because of over fertilization. It doesn't look that great then, and then these start to grow out of control to where you can't keep up with them. I know many of you have also had questions on the micro clover and the tall fescue with micro clover in it. This is the tall fescue with micro clover. You can see a lot of that clover is doing well. The tall fescue has not fully come out of dormancy yet, so I'll be interested to see as that greens up how everything does. Now, I would say it's fairly consistent on the clover in here, maybe not quite as consistent as I would have hoped, but we're just gonna go over time watching this and see what happens with it. Right now, this just looks to me like a tall fescue lawn full of clover, which it is, obviously, but I'll be interested to see over time how it blends together and what we get for a look out of that. Still have this behind the fence just because I was concerned about the deer eating all this stuff and me not really even having a plot to show you. So the first thing you're probably going to notice is there's quite a few weeds in here and some more of that rough type of grass right there that I was telling you about in those other low cut plots. But this gives you a sense, definitely the leaves are getting a lot smaller on this as it starts to mature and looks more like a carpet of green, basically. Now, many have asked how I'm going to plan on going about actually doing some weed control in there, and I don't really think that I'm going to. It's pretty much going to have to be done by hand. Personally, I don't think there's going to be much that you could spray on it that wouldn't damage the clover as well. So I'm not sure. In my mind, I feel like people who might have one of these as their lawn probably aren't going to be too concerned with a few weeds here and there, or it's probably going to all blend together when you mow it. But that's been one of the main questions, is how do you do weed control on this? And since I'm just learning all about it, I'm not really honestly sure what would be available to spray that wouldn't damage the clover. But also, I would say for some native areas that you just wanted some good ground cover, definitely has a really nice green to it and a really good ground cover. It is fairly expensive though for the seed, so that'd be something you'd have to consider. I hope that where you're at, you're able to enjoy some of the nice weather as the sun comes out and things warm up. So get out in the lawn if you can. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.